Hi there. I'm Dr. Ziggy Kozicki, and welcome to A to Zig. Today's program is about lying. Actually, it's liar, liar, pants on fire. We've all heard that. As a psychologist and as a court investigator and as a corporate compliance investigator and an employee assistance program specialist, I've had numerous encounters with people. As a politician holding public office, I've dealt with people who, in the political world, lie quite frequently, by the way. But anyways, I want to talk a little bit about lying from a perspective of how it interacts with our social well-being in our world. And so I want to begin by just going through some basics here. And the first thing I want to talk about is, what is a lie? Just so that we have a good understanding of that. A lie is a statement that's usually made by one who does not believe it but wants somebody else to believe it, with the intention that that person's going to be misled to believe it. And so this is something that people do. And all of us know that there are small lies and big lies. Small lies people tell for various reasons. And so why do people lie? Well, it's for a lot of good reasons sometimes, but sometimes for bad reasons. So people will lie because of personal transgressions. Probably a very common one is avoidance. There's pathological liars who do this routinely, thousands of lies. Malicious liars, to be polite, altruistic, for humor, for self-impression, personal advantage, economic advantage. And so the percentage of lies that are told break down in various different ways. And you can see that avoidance and personal transgression seems to be the main reasons why people lie, but followed very closely by economic advantage and personal advantage. And then it breaks down into all of these other kinds of areas. And so lying is something that is used by people frequently. Can you and I detect a lie? Well, imagine a citizen watching a politician denying involvement in a scandal. And let's presume that the citizen is trying to figure this out. Is a citizen going to be served best by their own impression or by some investigative deliberation? So can our subconscious mind be a good lie detector? Well, unfortunately for all of us, that's not the case. We're probably just as good flipping a coin as it is relying on our own judgment to determine if a person's a liar. In fact, research shows that it's about 53% of the time we can detect a lie. So research in the theory of lying has looked at the fact that probably people need to be more skeptical. Our intuition can get duped. So in the absence of conscious considerations, what we need to do is to really think that people are prone to lie. There's a theory called truth to fault theory that Levine has proposed, and it holds that humans are social beings whose success as individuals, as a collective, depends on cooperation. And so what the truth to fault process is passive acceptance of incoming communication with the idea that it'll help to make things better. And so we want to get along with people, and so we passively go along. So if people are poor lie detectors and aren't really good at being able to do this, what we have to realize is that data suggests that lie detection is something that we're all going to have some difficulty with. We have a deficiency here. The tendency to passively believe others puts people at risk of deception. So to some degree, we have to abandon this truth to fault and recognize that deception is probably very active around us. And we have to go through the process of cognitively processing this. So I probably wouldn't be lying if I said everybody lies at some time in their life. And we see this with children. Children at the age of 3 or 4 start to learn how to lie, and as they get better at it, they lie more often. Young people, particularly teenagers, young adults, tend to lie more than older people. As people get older, they tell less lies. Most people tell a lie a day. Some people tell 5, and then we have pathological liars who lie all the time, and that's all they do. So we know that lying takes place. And what's important to keep in mind is that we have to discern how to function in a world where there's lying. We have rules, laws that help us, that kind of guide us, that give us some control, guardrails, so that our lies don't become more of a problem than they're worth. And it's important for us to keep in mind that without those rules and guidelines, people probably would use lies more often. And so we have to have these external kinds of controls in order for us to stay in check. And that's where journalists and preachers and police officers, etc., school teachers, whatever, come into play, parents, to keep us on the right track. Otherwise, people would probably find themselves wanting to lie more often because they feel like that would be a way to function. If you have been paying attention, you know that lying has become a national story. People are talking about truth and trying to discern whether or not people who we trust are actually telling us the truth. And so this has been something that many people have been looking at. In fact, you know that even in the White House, they've been asking people to take lie detector tests. I have today with me Chuck Allen, who had worked for the state police for 33 years, fighting crime in the state of Michigan, but also has been a polygraph expert for 37 years. And so I'm fortunate to have him here, and we're going to talk a little bit about this whole idea of deception versus lying. So Chuck, tell us a little bit about how you see that.
Well, most people look at lying as just not telling the truth. Kind of hard to define it without using the word truth. Deception, however, is more what we see every day, and that is kind of a spin on the truth, so that we don't have to necessarily admit the truth. An example would be if I left work 10 minutes late. If I stopped and got a beer and I get home an hour late, if my wife were to ask me, "Oh, you're late," and I were to say, "Yes, I worked late," I'm not lied. I did work 10 minutes late, but I am being deceptive because that is not why I'm an hour late getting home. Mm-hmm. And we see a lot of that today.
Mm-hmm. So you kind of shade it so that you can kind of get away with, it'd be like somebody who's golfing and they think, well, I really could take another, but I'm not gonna. I'm just gonna take a 5 on this, and because that really didn't count. And
absolutely, it's a way of spinning your story. Mm-hmm. So that people believe you, even though it may not be accurate. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, there's types of lying, and you've probably seen over the 37 years many different kinds of liars, spin their thing or whatever. How do you view types of lying then?
Well, there's several different ways. We have what we call the common liar. Mm-hmm. And a common liar would be somebody who maybe in my line of work, they end up in a situation where it's in their best interest to not tell the truth. Maybe it keeps them out of court or out of an investigation. But we also have different types, like a pathological liar. Now, a pathological liar basically will lie to make themselves look better. They're grandiose in their lies. They always try to embellish mm-hmm. themselves, mm-hmm. and it is their natural state. Then we also have what we would call a compulsive liar. For no reason at all, a compulsive liar would lie simply because that's just what they do. And then we also have what I would consider to be a social liar, more because of their social situation. They would lie even if it was in their best interest to be truthful, because maybe situationally they're, say, locked in a prison, or mm-hmm. They know by telling the truth they're going to get somebody else in trouble that is like boyfriend, girlfriend. They just don't want to get them in trouble.
Yeah. And I think we were talking about something earlier. I said that my mother, she had dementia, and we were talking about something, and my son was there, and she asked me about it, and I thought, best not to disturb her, and I'm just going to say, no, don't think that didn't happen. Don't worry about it. Just whatever. And later, my son said, "You lied to your mother," and I said, "Well, I'm trying to keep her from getting all anxious and upset, and I figured that this would be the way to do it." Now, I felt bad about it, and my son reminded me of it, and it made me think twice about it. But I think that kind of falls in the category of sometimes what we do to be deceptive, maybe, or
That's correct. It's like telling your children about the tooth fairy and Santa Claus.
yeah, of course, yeah,
It on the surface, it's a helpless lie. Nobody gets hurt, and it's kind of how we raise our kids with the fantasies of childhood.
yeah,
But with that, we kind of teach children
yeah,
that the situation might be in their best interest to not be truthful, and so we kind of create the need to lie. Remember, my father, my mom and dad raised 5 boys, so needless to say, there was always one of us on the verge of trouble. And it was not uncommon, to hear the old lines that if you tell us the truth, you're going to get punished.
yeah,
But if you lie to us, you're going to get twice the punishment.
yeah,
Well, you kind of learn sometimes, is it worth the risk to lie
yeah,
and avoid punishment altogether?
yeah.
And I think sometimes that's what makes us begin call it that life of lying. That people will do it.
So there is sometimes a payoff. Now, the other thing that I got me thinking about this was so often now when we go to the movies or if you pick up a novel or whatever, people embellish Star Wars, for instance. There's all kinds of graphics. There's things that are created that aren't real, but they're seen as an artistic license to help the storyline or to promote something. So we do have that happening all the time, and we sometimes even look at it as entertainment. And so in a culture, we do sanction lying or some deception for the purposes of promoting some thought process or idea.
That's correct. And one of the things that it's hard when you're raising kids, or even young adults, to have a relationship with them where total honesty they can share with you. I don't know that I've ever met a teenager that when they leave the house, they're going to be absolutely accurate to their parents as to where they're going, what they did, what they're going to do.
If you've raised kids, you know that.
Well,
there's
and then when you look at the fantasy world of, say, Star Wars and everything else, sometimes that child comes home and rather than just tell us, I didn't do anything, they would actually make something up.
So this gets into the motives for lying, and sometimes the motives could be considered in the best interest of something, like telling my mother or not telling my mother something that I thought would get her more upset and give her a harder time. Or in your case, you're talking about 5 boys growing up, and you guys are trying to avoid sanctions from mom and dad, and probably also there's probably some peer pressure. The older kids are probably telling the younger kids, you better not say anything about this.
Oh, absolutely. That was one of the Allen rituals, was going down the pecking order. When somebody did something wrong, who was going to take the blame? Because one of us did it, and who's least likely to be punished for it? Otherwise we all got punished.
Yes.
But and I think that goes with the ground rules of life. I grew up on the west side of Detroit, and there was always a time where Hines Park was off limits because school's out, no catechism. Don't go to the park. Well, of course, that's the first rule, was that Saturday everybody goes to the park. And of course you have to either take the punishment or lie to your parents. And again, the motive is always more social. I want to be with my friends, and I'll take the heat if I get caught.
And you just hope that you don't get caught, and you dodge your parents long enough where they don't ask you, right?
Correct.
So in your line of work, maybe you've seen liars that are, in many respects, considered big liars or outrageous liars or criminal liars or whatever. How do you see those people, or what do you think about that part of the lying population?
Well, depending on, well, first of all, particularly in polygraph, we conduct an examination of a person.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really classify people coming in the door. The one thing everybody always talks about is a true psychopath.
Okay.
Okay. We would be running an examination on someone to check their veracity or their truthfulness. Mm-hmm. And generally speaking, when they come in, if they have a reason to lie, to cover up their crime, mm-hmm. we will get a physiological reaction when they deny committing the crime. But depending on their circumstances, during my career, I spent considerable years in Jackson running polygraphs. 30% of my work came right out of the walls of Jackson Prison for crimes being committed in the prison. Mm-hmm. There is a culture in prison that basically it is okay to lie. In fact, many times when it was in their best interest to be truthful, they would perpetuate the culture by not being truthful. And again, they could always justify it by, you don't understand, you don't live in there, it's dangerous, I would never tell on anybody. And the reality is that, they might get punished, for something when if they'd have been truthful, mm-hmm. Maybe they would never have been punished. Yeah. But I think that goes with the culture.
Yeah, and I had a long stint of doing psychological evaluations on criminals for the court system and for the juvenile system, and we had some cases, stone cold killers, as I used to refer to them, people that had called out that they were killers, but when the testing time came, they were trying to look good to go to court, so mm-hmm. all of a sudden they're choir boys, and try to get an interview with some of these people. But I can understand that people have a need sometimes for survival purposes, I guess.
Well, even some of the, I hate to use the word notorious, but what I would consider to be killers, yeah. that when the day came that they wanted to help, yeah. or actually be truthful, yeah. They could be very articulate, very helpful when it came to solving, all of the intricate details of the crime they committed. Yeah. Doesn't mean they were going to necessarily be 100% truthful with you, because they always kind of save back a little bit of a saving grace. That yeah. I'm here helping the police, so I'm not as bad a guy mm-hmm. as the newspapers make me out. Yeah.
Interesting that I just had a thought about, I had one case where a person had stabbed his wife, I think it was like 42 times. And he went into kind of a fugue state where he could not recall. The only thing he recalled is she came home after being out with her boyfriend, and he couldn't recall the rest. And we went through this long psychological testing process to find out if he actually was aware of the event. Mm-hmm. And at the conclusion of this, the thing that we reached was that his brain had basically blocked all that out. Now, whether he would ever remember it again or not was a curious question we couldn't answer. But I remember spending four days on the witness stand with a prosecuting attorney trying to compel me to say that this person knew he killed his wife. And it's that interesting thing how this person's brain or their psychological makeup was such that he was protecting himself from something that he didn't want to admit to. And this kind of, our brain can get into these kinds of crazy kinds of states, as I call them. And when you're talking about some of these people who are pathological, I think that sometimes they're not like you and I. They don't even know they're lying, or they don't consider it a lie for some reason. And we know that there are people like that.
Well, and they are amoral, and they can be very charming, even yeah. though they're pathological. Mm-hmm. A psychopath is the best example. Yeah. A lot of people will always want to talk about Ted Bundy. Yeah. And there's two things that you have to realize about someone that I put.
And he was a serial killer.
Well, and I put in his class the fact that if you saw him at the end when he was doing interviews, he tried to blame pornography on a good part of his deviancy. But was he doing a con job to sell, to try and keep himself from going to the electric chair?
Yeah.
Or was it true?
Did he really believe it?
Yeah, and we can't really read his mind. But one thing about him, and this comes with, when we talk about a true psychopath or a career criminal, I've had times where in the Metro Detroit area, somebody who broke into homes for a living. And when it comes to running a polygraph, we like to be as specific as we can and a specific issue, date, time, and place. Now, that's easy with a bank robbery. But when somebody breaks into homes, and this individual always went through the alley, always went through a basement window, date, time, and place meant nothing to him. You couldn't use an address and have him really know. So you kind of had to deal with the facts, and hopefully you had something that made the break-in you say were testing him on significant enough that he could recollect that he had done that break-in. Ted Bundy may not, allegedly killed so many women. He may not remember details.
Yeah, I think denial and repression of things that we don't want to deal with happens a lot. People tend to want to push those things out so they don't have to deal with them, particularly if it does cause some angst. And the lie then becomes one of, I don't know, or I can't remember. And now we know the skilled politicians always use a very good line, which is, I can't recall. You've probably heard things like that, right?
Well, and you're correct. And the wordsmith. Yeah. Those favorite, when Bill Clinton said, I never had sexual relations with that woman.
Yeah. Depends on what your interpretation of is.
Is. One of the things we always look at is I'm always cautious when it comes to young people. Yeah. Generally speaking, I would not conduct a polygraph on anyone under 12 years of age. Okay. Simply because of it is a stressful event to go through, but more importantly, they just are informative years, and can they truly understand telling a lie? Yeah,
and I think with the brain, it's about age 11 or 12 when a person starts to be able to do that kind of abstraction. Well, this has been very interesting. I hope that you as a viewer have had an opportunity to think about this idea of lying, and you may know a liar out there or two. I'm sure that you do. But, the fascination with people who spin yarns, tell us lies, and so forth, has been the kind of stuff that has made circuses and entertainment what it is today. But it also kind of digs at the fabric of society. Genuineness, truthfulness, honesty, those are still things that I think all of us really appreciate. And anything that we can do to promote that, I think is really good for all of us, particularly if we're trying to create a world in which we deal with real issues like climate change or a minimum wage or economy or a living wage or taking care of even violence in the community. So what I hope that we all understand is that we have to work our way around the lying and get to the truth. And once we get to the truth, then we have a better chance of actually doing something that is basically good. In medicine, we always look for that definitive diagnosis that is going to help us to cure whatever it is that ails the person. In society, we have to look for that definitive diagnosis also, so we can cure the kinds of things that ail society. And I hope we all work together to do that. Thank you for tuning in to A to Zig. Liar, liar, pants on fire is something we probably all have heard, and maybe you'll use it to declare something about somebody you come in contact in the next few days. Thank you very much. Hope you have a good day. Be blessed. Bye-bye.